outside the box. And footballers have come under fire for not wearing LGBTQ+ armbands. Whatever happened to the days of footballers, you know, just getting on a pitch and actually just playing football without the side order of moral lectures? Lots to get into tonight. I'll have all of that and more. Look who's keeping me company. Alex Dean, the political consultant, and Mike Buckley, the former Labour advisor. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live for the 6 o'clock news headlines.
Thanks, Michelle. Good afternoon. It's just after 6 o'clock. Here are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. The president of South Korea has declared martial law to, as what he says, protect the country from North Korean forces. But now we're hearing that South Korea's parliament has voted to block the president's declaration. In a surprise live television address, Yoon Suk-yeol said the move was a necessity to remove pro-North Korean elements and safeguard the country's constitution. It comes as the president accused the nation's opposition of controlling the parliament, sympathising with North Korea and paralysing the government with anti-state activities. But now the South Korean parliament speaker says that martial law declaration is invalid. These are currently live pictures in the capital, Seoul, where large crowds are gathering outside the National Assembly building, as soldiers and military vehicles have been seen in the area. Downing Street says it's closely monitoring the developments in South Korea. UK nationals are being advised to monitor travel updates. Now, 2 Christmas MasterChef specials have been pulled from the BBC's festive lineup after Gregg Wallace stepped down from hosting. The BBC confirmed that Celebrity MasterChef Christmas Cook-Off and Strictly Festive Extravaganza will no longer air following the ongoing investigation into allegations of inappropriate behaviour from 13 people over 17 years. In a statement, the broadcaster said that while the current series of MasterChef The Professionals will continue, the celebrity specials no longer fit with their programming plans. The BBC's also pulled 3 repeats of Inside the Factory, which Wallace co-hosts. His lawyers have denied the allegations, calling them entirely false. The King has officially welcomed the Emir of Qatar to the UK for a 2-day state visit, with crowds lining the streets to witness the royal procession and military parades. In her most high-profile engagement since cancer treatment, the Princess of Wales greeted Sheikh Tamim and his wife at Buckingham Palace alongside Prince William. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla has scaled back her involvement after suffering from a chest infection, now confirmed as a form of pneumonia. A royal source says her condition has improved, but she continues to experience bouts of extreme tiredness. Sir Keir Starmer says the UK won't choose between America and Europe, insisting both alliances are crucial in dangerous times. Speaking at the Lord Mayor's banquet in London, the Prime Minister rejected calls for the UK that he must pick sides, pledging to deepen ties with the US while rebuilding relationships in the EU.
The idea that we must choose between our allies, that somehow we're with either America or Europe, is plain wrong. I reject it utterly. Attlee did not choose between allies. Churchill did not choose. The national interest demands that we work with both.
In other news, the fate of the Elgin marbles remains in the hands of the British Museum after the Prime Minister and his Greek counterpart failed to discuss the sculptures. When asked, a spokesperson confirmed the government has no plans to change the law, leaving the decision to the museum's trustees. It remains unclear if a loan agreement will be reached for the iconic pieces. Andrew R.T. Davies has quit as leader of the Welsh Conservatives, calling his position untenable. It follows a confidence vote this morning after some Senate members threatened to resign from the shadow cabinet unless he stepped down. Mr. Davies says a substantial minority of the group rejected his leadership strategy, leaving him with no choice but to resign. 5 members of an organised crime group that smuggled 2.7 tonnes of cocaine in a shipment of bananas have been jailed. They were arrested by organised crime partnership officers at an industrial estate in Tottenham in February of 2021 after receiving 41 pallets of bananas into which the cocaine had been stored. The drugs had a different brand stamp on them, which corresponded to particular organised crime groups that were going to sell them on the streets of London and other parts of the UK. The drugs would have had an estimated street value of £210 million. Well, those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Lewis Mackenzie. There's more from me in an hour's time.
Thank you very much for that. A nice quiet day in the world, eh? I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel, I've got Alex Dean, the political consultant, and Mike Buckley, the former Labour advisor. Good evening, gents. To both
Good evening to you.
Very welcome tonight. As are each and every single one of you at home as well. There's lots to discuss, both home and abroad. You can join the conversation in all the usual ways. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. Go to the website, gbnews.com/yoursay. Of course, you can tweet or X me. Have you seen Donald Trump? He's been tweeting some quite no-messing, no-nonsense stuff on Twitter, hasn't he? Saying that he expects all the hostages to be released before he becomes president in January. He says they will be all hell to pay in the Middle East if that does not happen. What do you think to that? So much we need to get into today, but it's not just about Donald Trump and some of the things that he's been saying, ladies and gents. Oh, no, because have you seen what's been happening in South Korea? If you was walking past a TV set today, you might have just glanced up and thought to yourself that you was watching some kind of movie. Some of the scenes, armed police, you've had the military on the streets, helicopters in the skies above, many people on the streets having absolutely none of it, trying to get themselves into Parliament come what may. It's absolutely shocking scenes, and it's all because the president of South Korea declared martial law. He says he wants to protect the country from North Korean forces. What is it with unpopular leaders kind of trying to act like mini dictators in this day and age? Joining me now is Dr. Lee Jones, the Professor of Political Economy and International Relations. What do you think to that? What is going on, Dr. Lee Jones?
Hi, Michelle. Well, this is an act of desperation, frankly, from a deeply unpopular president. He has approval ratings in the high teens and low 20s and has done for many months. He only narrowly won the 2022 presidential elections, and his party lost control of Parliament in the legislative elections earlier this year. And so politics has basically been gridlocked because he can't get any of his legislation through Parliament, and Parliament keeps trying to investigate him and his wife for corruption and to impeach government officials for not investigating this corruption thoroughly enough. So matters have come to a head over the budget bill. The president can't veto his own budget, but Parliament has amended the bill to impose various budget cuts, including to the prosecutor's office, which is Yoon's power base. Yoon is a former chief government prosecutor, and that's where he leapfrogged from into the presidency. So the president essentially has declared martial law in order to try to eviscerate somehow the opposition and get his own way and salvage his own political career. And it really is, I think, an act of really profound desperation that has plunged South Korea into a very serious political crisis.
And you talk about leaders essentially being quite weak, but trying to act in certain ways egotistically, I suspect you would perhaps put it, to try and get some curry favour, if you like, on the international stage, rather than focusing enough on what's going on in their home territory. Is that right?
Yeah, well, certainly President Yoon has been unpopular and unable to get his agenda through domestically almost since he was elected. And what he's done instead is spent quite a lot of time overseas. He's been courted very heavily by the US and the wider West in the context of the confrontation with Russia and with China. And he's been invited, for example, to NATO summits and so on. And he made a state visit to the UK, indeed, and signed the Downing Street Accord with then Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. So he's definitely been courted by the West, and is much more popular with Western governments than he is with his own people. And we often see this when people become very unpopular at home. They sort of escape accountability and escape the criticism and abuse that they're being subjected to domestically by flying off internationally and looking very important. But, you know, the West should have realised that Yoon is a very weak and unrepresentative figure, and that his foreign policy stance of cozying up to the West probably won't last any longer than he does. And I think now, with this, his days are probably numbered. The South Korean people have a very strong record of mobilising en masse to defend their democracy and oust unpopular leaders. So they toppled from power then President Park in 2017. We saw mass protests of 500,000 people, which pushed Parliament to impeach her and then for the Constitutional Court to declare her presidency over. And as you've just seen from those pictures from Seoul, people are already mobilising in the streets in the middle of the night. The risk is, however, that if the police and the military don't stand aside, there is, of course, a risk of bloodshed. So we have to hope that people in the armed forces will come to their senses and martial law will be short-lived.
I mean, we're showing these pictures now, so you've got this unfolding there and on a completely different scale and for different reasons. You've got lots of kind of instability, France, Germany. We just had some news about resignations in Wales. Do you think the world, more generally, seems to just be a much more chaotic, unstable place right now?
Well, lots of people comment that the world is less stable. I think we have to remember that many parts of the world have been unstable for many years, and there was a sort of ignorance of that to some extent, or a belief that instability was something that happened to other people and not to us. But certainly the neoliberal political order and economic order that prevailed for 20, 30 years in the West and gave us this idea that things never really changed, elections never changed outcomes, that people couldn't really influence anything. That period has come to an end. That was a period in which Francis Fukuyama famously called the end of history, when there was no real contestation anymore. Liberalism had won, liberal democracy had won, liberal economic policy had won. And now that system is crumbling and people are very discontented with it after 30 years of rising inequality and political powerlessness. And so we're seeing populist political revolts around the world. The situation in South Korea is quite different. This is not about a populist political revolt. It's about a fundamentally unpopular political leader who the parliament is trying to bring to heel, which is their right and duty, and him trying to use every lever at his disposal to cling to power. But nonetheless, you're right. There is a great deal more political instability around than there was, say, 10, 15 years ago.
Interesting stuff. That's Dr. Lee Jones. Thank you very much for your insight there. He's a professor of political economy and international relations. Alex Dean, your thoughts on what's going on?
I agree with Lee that Yoon's days are numbered, and I agree that he's deeply unpopular in his country. I disagree that there's something wrong with either the current government or the last one seeking better relations with a nation that has been for so a long time now a key ally of ours. People tend to forget, whilst this country did not participate in Vietnam, we participated very significantly in the Korean War as part of the United Nations action that led to the creation of South Korea, and we have been friends of that nation ever since. And sometimes bad things happen in friendly nations, but that doesn't mean that you, prior to that, certainly you shouldn't have sought better relations. And indeed the deal that he was talking about us having signed with South Korea was a completely legitimate desire to improve trade terms, which I'm sure that if and when this business is put to bed, Keir Starmer's government will want to pursue too. So just to remind ourselves, this is not exactly the same, but in Thailand, some 10 years ago now, they had a full-blown military coup. It wasn't just martial law being imposed, it was a full-blown coup. We have sought prompt and significant better relations with Thailand, like other countries in that neighbourhood, not just through the comprehensive progressive Trans-Pacific trade partnership, but bilaterally. So whilst I think, I'm not making light of it, I think imposing martial law is appalling. The government in South Korea has said all political activities are banned. We prohibit any act that denies the liberal democratic system. Well, the biggest denial of the liberal democratic system is what the government is doing. They've controlled all media. Military now censors the media in South Korea completely. So what they're doing is appalling. But we've got nothing to apologise for, wanting to have been close to our friends in South Korea in the past, and I hope we can again in the future when this is finished.
Mike?
I would agree with all of that, and I think it's right that we do have close relations with South Korea, and they're obviously having a political crisis at the moment. But it does sound like it's self-contained for one thing, and I'm sure that their democracy will come through and order will be restored. But it's right that we're in close relationship with them. Obviously, we're an ally of South Korea and not of the North, which indeed is engaging in military action on the side of Russia in Ukraine, and we're obviously an ally of Ukraine. So it's good that we're working in collaboration with this nation, and I wish them well, and I hope they manage to sort out this internal mess soon.
Yeah, just one other thing. The suggestion that his opponents in South Korea, a country in which any form of support or sympathy for the North Koreans is a political death sentence, the suggestion that the Democratic Party, which now controls Parliament, is in any way sympathetic to the Communist North is completely bogus. So he's seized control through martial law in an outrageous way. But let us hope soon enough we see the back of this behaviour, potentially the back of you, and I agree with Lee on that, and then can get back onto better terms.
Let me ask you very briefly, before I go to a break, when you see it all kicking off in the world, do you sit there and think, thank goodness we've got David Lammy as Foreign Secretary? He is the man to sort it all out when it comes to the UK side of things.
I do not, but let's try and keep a sense of perspective. We have a government that won a decisive majority at the last election. I mean, I fought against it. I fought a seat in the last election against the Labour Party. They won an absolute majority. It's completely respected in our country. We had completely a peaceable transfer of power. In France, it looks like the government's going to go belly up. Macron can't get anything through Parliament. It looks like he's going to lose his Prime Minister. In Germany, Scholz is wholly below the waterline. In Spain, politics is dictated more or less now entirely by the rise of their far-right Vox. We talk about the far-right all the time in British media. That's an actual far-right movement. That's a bunch of fascists. So three of the biggest economies facing us on the European continent are in dire straits in a way that we in Britain simply are not. And whilst I, of course, wish we had a better Foreign Secretary than David Lammy, who does not, we do have to realise we are pretty lucky in our liberal democratic system in which people peaceably change government from one to the other, in which the system goes on and the system, broadly speaking, works. Unfashionable view, but I think true.
He says he wishes we had a different Foreign Secretary than David Lammy, who does not. You might not.
No, I don't. I mean, I've long respected David Lammy, and I think he's doing a very good job as Foreign Secretary, and I think he and Keir Starmer are doing a very good job on the world stage, rebuilding links that were ripped apart by the last government or just ignored by the last government in many, many ways. But I do agree that our democracy is in relatively decent shape, and we had an election this year, and the Labour Party won fair and square, and it's good. You know, Rishi Sunak was not trying to cling to power and staging a coup or staging a protest or inciting rebellion and, violent activity towards Parliament. So that is good, and we can celebrate the relative health of our democracy.
Yeah, and I know that lots of you will be shouting at your screens going, hang on, Michelle, because we've got this big majority, and it was only 20% of the electorate that voted the Labour Party in. Coming up a bit later on in the show, we'll talk about whether or not we need some reforms. There's been lots of conversations capping corporate donations to political parties. Should that be a thing? Banning MPs from betting on political outcomes, lowering voting ages, all of that coming up. And also, if you need to rewire the state of Britain, is it a good idea then to get a career civil servant to be the person that does the rewiring? Your thoughts? I'll see you in 2. Can you take the programme out my ear now, please?
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Restaurant St. Bart's executive head chef Johnny Crowe creates ramen with a British twist, using only the finest UK-sourced produce. As the only restaurant in London to hold both a Michelin star and a green Michelin star, St. Bart's emphasises sustainability and the diversity of British ingredients. Johnny joins me now. Johnny, congratulations on having these 2 Michelins. How do you get a Michelin green star?
Probably a better question for the inspectors, but I mean, I think it's down to a lot of hard work.
What hoops do you have to go through?
So I think it's working every day on it. The sustainability isn't something that you just achieve and then therefore you have it and you can sort of relax. It's about every day trying to be better, trying to make a restaurant and a business that is overly sustainable.
So what things do you do to make it sustainable?
So one of the main things that we've really tried to do is focusing on British produce, and actually, part of that is about sustainability and food miles. A massive part of it for us was also about sort of helping the British economy and the farming economy and our fisheries as well. But yeah, no, the idea.
We have a lot of farms near St Bart's, which is in the heart of the city of London.
Well, funnily enough, there's an amazing collective called Shrub Provisions who we use a hell of a lot, who work with farmers all around East Sussex. So it makes a difference from flying it in from Kenya or somewhere else like that. But no, like a big part of it was, one, using British produce to cut down on food miles, but also helping sustain our farming industry.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry, Alex Dean and Mike Buckley alongside you. Lots to discuss. Let me ask you a simple question. Do you think that the world is a safer, stable place at the moment, or do you feel that sands are shifting? Your thoughts on that? The Prime Minister, he was at an event last night and he was speaking out about when it comes to who our allies should be and the choice that we might have to face or not. Take a listen.
The idea that we must choose between our allies, that somehow we're with either America or Europe, is plain wrong. I reject it utterly. Attlee did not choose between allies. Churchill did not choose. The national interest demands that we work with both.
Alex Dean, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, look, he's obviously right. You don't have to choose. Like, we're not on the playground. You're my best friend, and you're not my friend anymore. It's not like that. But he is slightly avoiding the issue because the UK has been explicitly invited by President Trump's economic advisor, Stephen Moore, to, these are his words, distance itself from the socialist European Union and cleave closer to the United States economic model, what the French often call the Anglo-Saxon model. The reason that what Starmer's doing, slightly avoiding the issue, is that in trade terms sometimes and in regulatory terms you do have to choose a model that is closer to a deregulated, more free market position or a more communautaire one. And on that we are going to have to choose. And of course, my preference is obvious that the United States is the fastest growing economy in the G7, which is why, by the way, Keir Starmer is now dropping this pledge to have the fastest growth of quality of living in the G7, because he ain't going to do it, given that. We are their largest investor. They are ours. Every day, 1 million Brits get up and work for an American business, myself included. 1 million Americans get up and work for a British business. There are no two closer financial centres than New York and the UK. And, you've got to choose between that gangbusters economy and the slowest growing economic area in the world. When I think it's obvious you want to choose the United States on the economic model. The difficulty is then when you come to other stuff. And I just think President Trump currently looks like he's wrong on Ukraine. We don't know what he's going to do yet, but we know that our friends in Europe, whilst their governments are falling apart around their ears, are at least more willing to be supportive of Ukraine in the face of their completely unwarranted invasion by Russia. And on that sticking point, I'm closer to the Europeans. But on economics, it's obvious for me.
Mike?
We don't have to choose. I mean, Keir Starmer is entirely right in that, in terms of security or in terms of economics. We, of course, do need an economic model. We need a model of social security and a way of functioning, structure and economy in a way that the British people will accept, for one thing, and certainly British people would not accept an American model when it comes to, say, welfare standards or healthcare and things of that nature, which, of course, means we do have to cleave closer to a European model, which, to some degree, we invented. Of course, not entirely, I hasten to add. But it is also true that when it comes to economics, we do about 3 times as much trade in terms of value with the EU than we do with the US. So in terms of trade volumes and therefore in terms of value value to our economy, it's much more important that we prize that trading relationship rather than a US trading relationship. Last time Trump was in office, he did nothing to put together or even offer a trade deal with the UK. If he did offer one, the only way that it would be of real economic value to the US would be if they had significant access to our agriculture and to our health service. Neither of those things are going to be on the table. So I think it's just as unlikely we're going to get a trade deal with the US this time as last time Trump was in power.
The Americans spend significantly more than us on healthcare.
But they get far worse outcomes.
Absolutely. OK, right. Well, look, people will just watch the programme and judge whether that's true or not. I mean, they are, of course, phenomenally obese. There is that point. But in terms of their treatment for many conditions, I just don't think that's true at all. But it was just your assertion that we won't have the American healthcare system.
They can afford it, but a lot of people just cannot afford it at all. Whereas other nations with a similar model to our own, like many European nations, they spend more and they get better outcomes.
Than us,
The US spends a hell of a lot more, but they get far worse outcomes across the population.
The biggest misunderstanding in this debate, which I know, Michelle, wasn't your point, but the biggest misunderstanding in this debate isn't that the UK should be like the States. I agree with you, that's not going to happen. It's how different we, in fact, are from European models, which have never adopted the NHS, supposedly the envy of the world. And if that were the case, you'd wonder why nobody's copied it.
Well, we're talking about similarities and differences between us and the States. There is a massive difference, something that makes me very envious, I have to say, because over in the States, they're really shaking things up with the minds of the likes of Elon Musk coming in, setting up a crack team, setting themselves timed boundaries to shake things up. What have we got? Keir Starmer talking about an essential, necessary rewiring of the British state. Yes, everyone says, but hang on a second, it shows some career civil servant to be the man to deliver it. What do you think to that? I'll see you in 2.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into tomorrow, it's going to be another chilly start, turning wet and windy from the west, but elsewhere there should be plenty of hazy sunshine to go around. We've currently got high pressure sitting out to the east, clinging on before we start to see a change from the west as a frontal system moves in, bringing a squeeze in the isobars too, so fairly blustery at times across the northwest of Scotland. Any rain generally fizzling out as that system moves its way south and eastwards, bringing in some clouds, still perhaps a slight bit of rain across parts of Wales, but generally turning clearer to the north of this. A few showers to the far north of Scotland, but with clear skies, we're likely to see some frost by the morning. We may even see some icy stretches just to the north and east of Scotland, so do take care if you're out and about during the early hours of Wednesday morning. But otherwise, there's going to be plenty of bright sunshine around, even though it is going to be a cold start. Similar across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England. Chilly, but it is going to be largely dry. Perhaps a bit more cloud across central and southern areas. Still a chance of some light rain across parts of Wales, mainly across hills. But for most of us, it's going to be a largely dry day. Plenty of sunny spells to go around. We'll eventually see a change from the west, though. More clouds spilling in here, some outbreaks of rain, this turning heavy at times, just moving into parts of Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland by the afternoon, and turning quite blustery under this cloud and rain too. So on the whole, it is going to be a fairly chilly day, largely dry, though we are going to see that change from the west. As we head into Thursday, any rain moving its way overnight will linger across the southeast for a time, turning slightly drier with a fair amount of cloud around, but it's going to be a very blustery day, and later on we'll see further outbreaks of heavy rain move their way in from the west with very strong winds at times. So it is going to be an unsettled end to the week and likely remaining unsettled as we head into the weekend. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long queues heading south-west of Glasgow down the M74. One lane's closed along the entry slip road where it meets the M8 intersection where a lorry's broken down. Recovery work is underway. On the M6 in the West Midlands, the inside lane on that 4-lane stretch closed southbound at junction 9, the Wednesbury exit heading towards Birmingham, along with the entry slip being partly blocked where a lorry's broken down right on the slip road. That's causing queues back to the M54. And staying in the West Midlands at Winson Green, so this is just to the west of Birmingham city centre, of course. Winson Green Road is shut for a police investigation just by the canal bridge. I can see on camera police are parked up there. And in Norfolk, south of Kings Lynn, the A10 at South Runcton blocked by an accident. And on London Underground, the Central Line can't run Woodford to Epping due to a trespass incident at Loughton. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
sorry to interrupt Michelle's programme, but we have some breaking news for you now. MasterChef presenter Gregg Wallace is facing fresh allegations of inappropriate sexual behaviour after he stepped down from the show last week. The BBC are reporting that one woman is claiming that Mr Wallace touched her bottom at an event, and another says he pressed his crotch against her while filming on a different show. His lawyers have strongly denied he engages in behaviour of a sexually harassing nature. This, of course, comes as 2 Christmas MasterChef specials have been pulled from the BBC's festive lineup. We will, of course, bring you the very latest as we get it on GB News. But for now, it's back to Michelle.
Right, well, there you go. I shall leave that one unspoken about for obvious reasons. I do find myself often wondering, though, at what point are they ever going to look into the behaviour of some women out there in the workplace? But anyway, let's leave that there, shall we? I am Michelle Dewberry, alongside you till 7 o'clock tonight. My panel, if you're just tuning in, wondering what delights are alongside me tonight. Am I allowed to say that in this day and age?
Certainly can you. I don't mind one bit.
Alex Dean, the political consultant, alongside me, as is Mike Buckley, the former Labour advisor. Well, then, before the break, I was saying, you know, by now everyone's familiar with the fact you've got the likes of Elon Musk, I would say, one of the best riveting, successful minds in the world, quite frankly. How exciting to have him coming in, looking at your politics, looking at how you can do things more effectively, efficiently and better. Yes, I hear you say, well, what have we got here in this country? We've got Keir Starmer saying that Britain essentially needs an entire rewire of the way that we do things. I like your talking there, Keir Starmer, I do. But if you're going to get someone to do a rewiring of the entire British state, do you think we've kind of got the positioning right when the electrician, if you like, that we choose to do said rewiring is someone who's been responsible for a lot of the rewiring for the last 2 decades?
Well, let's agree if you're doing rewiring, you do want an electrician to do it rather than someone who doesn't know the first thing about electricity, wires and current. So it's very likely you do want a civil servant to do it. I've got no objection to that. My rather larger concern here is that, as I understand it, this is the civil servant who was responsible for, part of a team responsible for, our pandemic preparedness programme, which she led for some years before it turned out that we had a pandemic for which we were not prepared. Right? I would see that as the larger issue rather than appointing a civil servant, because I think in the end you're very likely to, the government wants to do stuff, civil servants do those things for it. So I've got no real issue with a civil servant doing it. I just wonder if they've got the right one.
Yeah, I wanted to see a completely different, out-of-the-box thinking. I don't want civil servants to be going in there who've worked in that environment, marking their own homework with that mindset already embedded. I want completely fresh blood, entrepreneurial people doing it. Where are you on it?
I mean, I have to say, I think that would lead to disaster. I mean, I think, as Alex said, if you need an electrician to do an electrician's job, you need a civil servant to do a civil servant's job. And I think it's right that this is a very senior appointment that Keir Starmer's made, and you therefore need somebody who's got experience in the civil service and knows how it functions and knows also how Number 10 functions and can work well with the Prime Minister and his team. Whether this is the right appointment, I don't know. I mean, I've never met the man, so I'm not really in a position to comment. But it is the case that Patrick Vallance, who, of course, became, notably famous during the pandemic, did criticise the work of this gentleman in terms of the run-up to the pandemic. And indeed, I think there's some story I was reading the other day that Patrick Vallance had challenged him as the pandemic was kicking off, saying, we need to do more. And Chris had replied that, no, we don't. But in fairness to him, I mean, to think back to that point, March 2020, the world was in chaos on the pandemic and in terms of how to respond, how quick to respond and what to do. And in part because we as the UK had prepared for a flu pandemic, what we got was a coronavirus pandemic, for which you need a different kind of response. So I have some sympathy on all sides, but I think time will tell whether he's the right appointment or not.
I accept some of its hindsight. I also think it's important that the Prime Minister gets who he wants. The Prime Minister is legitimately elected. It's a vital appointment at the centre of government. It should be someone the Prime Minister has confidence and trust in. And then in the end, just not to be too blunt about it, on your head be it. If it succeeds, it's to the Prime Minister's credit. If it doesn't succeed, reverse.
Well, I'm out there on my own. I don't mind that. No problem at all. Let's talk electoral reform. There's lots of conversations about how we should tinker, shall we say, with our system. Whether or not voting ages should be lowered, Automatic voter registration was another suggestion being explored. And also, I found this quite interesting. There's been loads of rumours about Elon Musk, whether or not he would donate to Reform UK. Who knows? I don't know. Whether or not there should be a cap on corporate donations to £100,000 in British politics. Well, your thoughts on some of this?
Taking a few of those in turn. On the point you made about voting reform, auto registration for me would be fine. You then get the debate about whether we should have compulsory voting, but that's a separate discussion. Whether we should have the all be automatically enrolled on the register, that seems to me to be very sensible and may well do something to increase participation. I'm all in favour of that. So moving on, I cannot help but notice that with the largest single donation made just before the election, £4 million was for the Labour Party from a Cayman Island-based hedge fund. Martin Dewberry's show earlier, Martin obviously didn't know that because he was wound up. His Labour person was saying, "Oh, the support for the Labour Party is all grannies putting in 10p pieces and union members putting in their widow's mite." No, it was 4 million out of the Cayman Islands. So if they cap it at 100k, they're going to be cutting off their own nose as well as those of others, despite their face. So I'm not quite sure they'll go down that route of limiting donations.
Mike?
I don't know whether they'll go for the 100,000 figure, but I do hope that they bring a cap in that is of some reasonable value, because what we don't want is huge donations, particularly from abroad, of course, trying to influence our politics. But we also want to make sure that democracy is democracy and that nobody's trying to buy government or buy access to government. And indeed, I mean, there was a donor to the Conservative Party, Frank Hester, who apparently gave 20 million over a period of time, which is a hell of a lot of money. Who knows what he got for that? Maybe he got nothing for it. I have no evidence otherwise. But nonetheless, I think the less personal and corporate money coming into politics and political parties in a way that may influence or be seen to possibly influence them or have the sniff of that is probably a good thing. I agree with you on automatic registration. I think that's a great idea.
But everyone's under the cloud, though. People will be thinking about Lord Ali. So it's one thing talking about capping large corporate donations in terms of restricting influence. But we've got a government that was having their own clothes bought for them, their wives' clothes, their own glasses bought for them, and people, the buyer, having parliamentary passes.
Passes for glasses.
This is a bit weird.
I think there is a widespread perception in the country, and I'm sure in the Labour Party, that the perception that created was, of course, not helpful, and that needs to never happen again.
It wasn't the perception that was unhelpful, it was the reality.
Well, it was the reality of the donations, but the perception was that they were having gifts given for them by somebody who may have been seeking to influence policy, although apparently he had no interest in policy and just simply wanted them to get elected.
But see, I think it's really interesting on two fronts. Yes, Hester donated to the Tory party. Yes, this Cayman Islands Fund donated to the Labour Party. They donated to parties that were fighting elections. You can see what the purpose was, even if you disagree with the fact they should be able to, and even if you disagree with the party they donated to. Those were factual donations, and here we are winding up debating about whether Elon Musk's going to give X money. He's never said he's going to. So we're all chasing our tails on this rumour. It's amazing how these stories start up and get pursued like that. But the second thing that's different about the big donations to parties and the ones you're talking about, Michelle, is that somebody should have asked our Prime Minister, our serving Prime Minister, why was somebody buying your wife's dresses then? You a wealthy man, her a wealthy woman. Why did somebody do that? It's just weird.
I was just about to say, I will never quite get over the weirdness of that. And I think if some random guy was buying my clothes...
I'm going to buy your glasses and your suits and your shoes, and why?
I have something to say about that. I find it such an odd, strange setup, ladies and gents.
To most people, it does look strange.
I'll tell you what else is very strange as well. Let's play this clip. Kevin Craig. Do you remember him? He was a regular panel. He's got his head in his hands already, Alex. Do you remember this fella? Take a listen to a clip from Kevin Craig.
I think that public confidence would benefit from new legislation, which I've prepared with a London law firm, that makes it actually does make it illegal for anyone involved in politics, MPs, councillors, advisors, all of it, to have any political bets.
So that was Kevin Craig. He was trying to be a Labour candidate. Do you remember this at the last election? He was then discovered to have placed a bet against himself, and he was suspended from the Labour Party as a result. He has been cleared of any wrongdoing, but now he's basically, as you just said there, calling for bans to be placed to prevent this kind of stuff. Alex Dean.
I don't mean to be unkind, and I've been on your show several times with Kevin, and we work in the same industry, which, believe it or not, on this evidence is communications. Sometimes a period of silence is the best advised course of action. And here's Kevin talking about whether public confidence would benefit from a ban on political betting. He made a bet when he was the candidate in the election about his results. You know, I put the oven on, I put my hand in the oven burnt my hand. Why won't government act on this hand-oven scenario? It's just completely ridiculous. And so Kevin, Lord love him, dear old Kevin, just shut up for a bit.
Harsh words. Right?
I mean, to be honest, I kind of have to agree. I just feel, I mean, he's trying to get this law passed so that people, people involved in politics don't bet on political outcomes. Most people involved in politics would know intuitively that that's a really, really bad idea. Hence, there is no particular need to have a law on that. Most people would just think, is this a good idea? No, it isn't, so I won't do it.
It's blatantly
obvious.
It's blatantly obvious.
It's like saying we don't need a law put in place to stop people jumping in front of buses. Most people know that's a bad idea, so they don't do it.
Government didn't explicitly tell me that I couldn't jump in front of the 73.
Exactly. I mean, it's just, in fairness, I've never met the man. I'm sure he's a very nice man. And obviously, as a Labour person, I wish he'd won his seat at the last election. But, I just think he needs to go and get on with his life, quite frankly, and talk about something else.
Every time he talks about it, he reminds people that he's the guy who put a bet on against himself and wound up getting deselected.
I'm not sure why he wants to define himself in this way, but, each to their own, each to their own.
Well, I like Kevin. I'll stick up for you, Kevin. I like Kevin. But I do think it is a little bit odd to suggest that the only way one can perhaps do something they ought not to be is if someone else has come and literally created a rule that tells you you can't do that.
You can like Kevin very much and still think this is completely daft.
Well, yes. I'll tell you what I also find pretty laughable. The fact that we feel the need to tell footballers that if they want to go onto a pitch and kick a ball about, then suggesting to them that they ought to be wearing LGBTQ plus rainbow bands. Some of them, footballers, that is, are rebelling against that, and they've come under fire. What do you think to that?
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Let's speak now to Charlie Mullins, who's the founder of Pimlico Plumbers, and entrepreneur Oliver Hodgson. Really good to see you both this morning. Charlie, let's start with you. Has working from home and the culture surrounding working from home killed work experience, do you think?
Undoubtedly. Many companies now are not getting youngsters in for the work experience because of the fact they don't have the staff in. So if they're only in 2 days a week, they're not going to get in the youngsters. They've got no one to train them. So it's killed it totally. And if you think it's bad now, probably 4 or 5 years from now, it'll be absolutely ridiculous. This working from home, I said from day one, is going to kill youngsters' futures, youngsters' careers, and getting people into the workplace. So now the damage is showing through, unfortunately. COVID finished a couple of years ago. The working from home should have stopped and get people back into the workplace.
I mean, Oliver, you have to say it's difficult to see how people in a work-from-home environment can do any sort of on-the-job training at all.
It's really interesting, the work experience piece, actually, because we run an internship program in the summer here. We had 5 people in the office in person and they really thrived. But we did have a couple of people who joined remotely because of their own reasons, right, and where they were. I think it's a bit more nuanced than that as well, because I've got clients who have completely remote teams. Now, I don't. I have an office and our team are based in here. But our clients who do, they're able to offer work experience opportunities digitally with fantastic technology to people across the world, right? So they have people in their team who are working from all sorts of different continents, which is obviously fantastic. But I agree with Charlie, right? You cannot knock in-person engagement. You cannot knock being in the office.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock. Alex Dean and Mike Buckley remain alongside me. Who's this? Someone, Adrian, that's your name. You're saying, we left the EU. It feels like Starmer wants to take us all back. At the end of the day, we need to prioritise our relationship with the States and with Donald Trump, he says. Maria says, can I just chip in at this point, please, to point out that she thinks that Starmer and Lammy are doing a very good job indeed. She's certainly very happy. Mark is saying if Labour is going to get, if Labour gets huge donations, why shouldn't Reform UK be allowed to do the same? I think this is the point there, Mark. I think if they change the rules, obviously they can't just change them for Reform UK or anyone else. It would be across the board, right? Adrian says, Michelle, all of this is nonsense. He doesn't think that Elon Musk will give a penny to Reform UK. Well, there you go. Look, let's talk about football, shall we? Because I kind of remember the good old days when footballers used to just get on a pitch and kick a ball about, win or lose, and off everyone went after their meat pie and their pint, feeling all a little bit distracted from the ills of the world. These days, I can't help but notice, but the pitch does seem to be a place where people, the footballers, are expected to kind of signal their virtue often. It caught my eye that the Premier League have popped up with their LGBTQ plus armbands, Stonewall's campaign this is, you've got your rainbow laces and so on. We've had a couple of players now that are saying that they won't wear them. One Ipswich Football Club, their captain, he's a practicing Muslim. He says he won't wear it because of religious reasons. Another player, he wore the band, but he wrote, I love Jesus on his rainbow captain band. What do you think to some of this?
I first declared interest. I'm from Suffolk and I am an Ipswich fan, but I would have these views, I think, even if it weren't our fantastic club and if it weren't our fantastic captain who's been affected by this. Stonewall's campaign is one that desires to produce a game in which everyone belongs. Mm-hmm. And everyone includes Sam Morsy, who chooses not to wear an armband that is not compulsory. Mm-hmm. So as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty much the end of it. You know, you can't compel people to wear these things. People have different views, and indeed on the Palace, Ipswich has got Crystal Palace in like an hour, so it's going to be interesting because the two captains are going to be playing each other. The Crystal Palace captain is in, I think, I gather, some trouble because, not because he's a Muslim, which is what your channel said earlier today, it's not because of that, it's because he defaced the armband that he had, he'd written something on it. Whereas Sam Morsy, as far as I know, whilst people can form a view of whether he chooses to wear an armband or not, he's not in any trouble because it's not compulsory to wear something. And indeed, what would a symbol mean if it was compulsory to wear it? It's only because you believe in it that you wear something like that anyway. So, as far as I'm concerned, Ipswich, the best team in the Premiership, has nothing to answer for about this.
Mike, your thoughts?
I mean, I agree with all of that, and I think that it's good. I mean, footballers are very influential people in our society. It's good that they support social causes of whatever nature, but it's also good that they have the choice as to whether to support one particular cause or another cause or not. And I have no problem with Sam deciding he doesn't want to wear it for whatever reason.
When you say that you've got no problem with the pitch being some kind of, I don't know, platform for people to point out moral crusades or virtue signalling or causes or whatever, where do we draw the line?
I don't know if you do draw the line. I mean, it's perfectly reasonable for Stonewall to go to the Premier League and say, is this a cause that you wish to support? Premier League say, yes, that's fine. Nobody's being unduly influenced or pressured in any way. Yeah. It's also perfectly reasonable for Sam or any other footballer to say, well, I don't want to take part, thank you very much. We live in a liberal democracy. We live in a liberal society. People have the freedom to say, well, this is what I believe. This is what I believe. Oh, how interesting. Let's have a conversation. That's the way we live in, and it's right that we live in that world.
Exactly. And my only thing I would just add, my preference would have been opinion that his religious beliefs hadn't even been raised. He should have just said, I don't want to wear it, so I'm not going to. And that, in a free society, should have been the end of the matter.
But you say that there isn't a line. The Wembley Arch, a while ago, they lit up their arch. They light it up in the rainbow. They lit it up for the Ukraine colours. Then they were asked by people to light it up in the Palestine colours, and they said no, which caused a lot of problems for them at the time. And I was watching on and I was thinking, but you brought this on yourselves. Why don't you just be footballers playing football? Let everyone have 90 minutes or so of escapism from the ills of the world. Why do we need to have things like different causes, whatever the causes are, blasted for those 90 minutes?
But why do you want to control football in this country, or control a footballing club or footballers, and say you can do this but you cannot do that? That's you imposing your worldview and your preferences on all footballers and all footballing clubs in this country, and I'm personally not comfortable with that.
And indeed, to be clear, in the example we're discussing, Ipswich Town Football Club fully supports the Stonewall campaign. It just you can't compel individuals to agree with your corporate position on a matter of principle or philosophy. There is a difficulty with your position, Michelle, which I share, because generally speaking, I don't think football should be drawn into these kinds of things. But I do like it when footballers wear the stylised poppy. And when they were told that they couldn't do that, I felt uncomfortable about that. So there are some things that I do like to be shown. You may say, of course, that's not political and it's something everyone can unite around, that it's uncontroversial. But that's not actually true. There are some people... I strongly support the Royal British Legion. I strongly support wearing the poppy. But there are some people who feel different about it, right? So actually there are some political things that you and I think, both like in football, right?
Yeah, and it's not about me controlling scenarios. I would just like to see the pitch being a neutral space where the sport of football is performed. That'll do. Thank you very much. I do feel differently about the poppy, of course, because if it were not for the people that sadly lost their lives and continue to in current conflicts and so on, none of us would have the freedom to be sat at a football match watching said game. So for me, that's slightly different. I do draw an issue with the likes of Stonewall, and I guess, actually, if I'm completely honest, a lot of my feeling does come with that organisation, an organisation who originally did great work when it comes to gay rights and things like that, no problem. Now, I think that they've just kind of moved into this space that I don't think organisations should be working with or supporting in any way. I would never wear an armband or a set of laces or whatever to show any solidarity with the likes of Stonewall. And quite frankly, if no organisations going forward were partnered with Stonewall, that would make me very happy indeed.
But again, you're trying to impose your will on every footballer and every football club in this country, and that is not a liberal society which everybody has the freedom to choose whatever.
I
think the flip side is that people feel compelled or coerced because, of course, this is supposedly a story because one Premiership captain didn't go along with the consensus that everyone does it. Right? At this time, we all do this political thing, and at that point, you do become marked out, and you have to give your reason. There will be some people who say, I don't want to, especially down the lower leagues where this is not universal. People might say, I didn't want to wear a rainbow band because I have concerns about what it would mean for women's rights. Right, because of the inclusion of men who define as women in female sports, where it's having an issue, especially in contact sports, women's safe spaces and changing rooms and so forth. And Stonewall has a position on that issue that I don't agree with. Right? And so that's why I would have preferred if the individuals who don't want to do this didn't even get interrogated about why. Because as soon as they do, and they say it's because of my religious beliefs or it's because I disagree with you on women's rights or something, then they are on, no pun intended, they are on the back foot. And they wind up having to justify why they're not going to go along with the group thing, and I think that's unfair. That's the part where I agree with you, that it's unfair on people who just want to play football.
I mean, in terms of Stan Borsey, he seems to have volunteered the information himself that he didn't want to wear it because he's a Muslim and he's proud of his beliefs and his religion.
Sure.
And he's therefore just saying, this is who I am, deal with it. And I have a lot of, a great deal of respect for that.
Well, what do you make to it all? I think that when you start picking and choosing which causes you do and don't want to be a part of when it comes to football organisations, you do find yourself coming unstuck. And I gave that example of the Wembley Arch. You're lighting it up for some conflicts and not lighting it up for others. Just kick a football about, lads. Come on, let's get back to basics, shall we? Look, speaking about basics, time flies. It's almost 7 o'clock. Thank you very much, Mike, for your contribution. Alex Dean for yours too. And thank you to each and every single one of you for your company over the last hour. I appreciate it. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow night.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head into tomorrow, it's going to be another chilly start, turning wet and windy from the west, but elsewhere there should be plenty of hazy sunshine to go around. We've currently got high pressure sitting out to the east, clinging on before we start to see a change from the west as a frontal system moves in, bringing a squeeze in the isobars too, so fairly blustery at times across the northwest of Scotland. Any rain generally fizzling out as that system moves its way south and eastwards, bringing in some clouds, still perhaps a slight bit of rain across parts of Wales, but generally turning clearer to the north of this. A few showers to the far north of Scotland, but with clear skies, we're likely to see some frost by the morning. We may even see some icy stretches just to the north and east of Scotland, so do take care if you're out and about during the early hours of Wednesday morning. But otherwise, there's going to be plenty of bright sunshine around, even though it is going to be a cold start. Similar across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, chilly, but it is going to be largely dry. Perhaps a bit more cloud across central and southern areas, still a chance of some light rain across parts of Wales, mainly across hills. But for most of us, it's going to be a largely dry day, plenty of sunny spells to go around. We'll eventually see a change from the west though, more clouds spilling in here, some outbreaks of rain, this turning heavy at times, just moving into parts of Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland by the afternoon, and turning quite blustery under this cloud and rain too. So on the whole, it is going to be a fairly chilly day, largely dry, though we are going to see that change from the west. As we head into Thursday, any rain moving its way overnight will linger across the southeast for a time, turning slightly drier with a fair amount of cloud around, but it's going to be a very blustery day, and later on we'll see further outbreaks of heavy rain move their way in from the west with very strong winds at times. So it is going to be an unsettled end to the week and likely remaining unsettled as we head into the weekend. Bye for now.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems heading southwest